Welcome to the online book launch of ReSet, Making the Most of the Rest of Your Life, written by Helen Hirsh Spence and Debra Yearwood. Today, we're not just launching a book, we're opening a conversation about how we live the second half of our lives. So let's get started. Helen is a former educational leader of both public and independent schools. She is the founder and CEO of Top 60 Over 60. And Debra is a communications executive with more than 20 years of experience in the not-for-profit sector. And currently she's working for the Mental Health Commission of Canada. So let's just jump in with some of these great questions. Helen, why did you want to write this book?
I'll tell you after you pin us. How's that?
You're pinned.
Doesn't look like it from here. So,
You are, Helen. Go ahead.
okie doke. I don't think so. I see everybody. So there's an issue. Huh?
Yes, yes, Helen, you would because I did it from my end. So it's okay. Go ahead. So here's the
Okay.
question again. Why did you want to write this book?
So this links indirectly to the book, but to be clear, about I guess it's 20 years ago now, at my 45th high school reunion, I looked around the room and saw all of my colleagues who are authors, politicians, doctors, lawyers, and you know what. And I realized that all of these people were going to be retiring in short order, and that we were going to lose the experience, the knowledge, the skill, the expertise of everybody in that room because of the way in which society was functioning. So that was the first realization of what it meant to take a look at the changing demographic. And then many years later, I was sitting around after I was at cocktail parties. I'd been a leader in professional settings before. Everybody wanted to talk to me. And suddenly I realized not that many people were interested in talking to me anymore. My identity and my relevance was tied to the career that I had had for over 35 years. And I felt adrift. I felt lost. I felt meaningless. And so I realized then that something significant was affecting me, although I didn't know what it was. And it was ageism. And it was listening to a broadcast, I believe on CBC, that opened my mind to the fact that ageism exists, that there's something called internalized ageism, and that I had bought the negative narrative about growing older. And that really is what prompted me to get started in this whole field of advocacy and helping myself and others overcome what was really internalized ageism. That's a short story.
Thanks, Helen. How about you, Debra? Why did you want to
Um,
write this book?
Starts with ReSet for me. So back in 2018, Helen and I started to develop a program with assistance from the Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation, and uh, we had I think a rare opportunity that most people don't get, which is to we were given the freedom to do a deep dive into a subject that was near and dear to our hearts and do as much research as we possibly could, and we did, and we developed this program called ReSet, and we put it to the test. And just the reaction of participants to the program, the way that they engaged, the way that we saw people start to shift and transform in the way they presented themselves, just was so telling about how needed the information was. And given all of the work that we had done and all of the time and effort that we put in to do the testing and to see did this program actually work, it seemed a waste to either limit it to just the people that we could reach through workshops, when we could write a book and get to a much wider audience. And so that was the birth of the idea of let's make ReSet into a book.
So this is a wonderful topic. So my question is why particularly now? Maybe you could answer that, Helen. What sparked the urgency to write ReSet now?
Uh, there are really two things. One is that I recognized the demographic shift that was taking place and the fact that nobody's really paying attention. And I'm not just talking about boomers turning 80 this year. I'm talking about everything is shifting worldwide. And in particular, and this book focuses on North America. We have stats from Canada and from the United States in particular, but everything that we write about really does reflect what's happening, the global trend. So that was one reason why I thought it was more than timely. The other thing is that in 2021, the World Health Organization put out a global report on ageism, stating that 1 out of 2 individuals worldwide was ageist. And because of my understanding of what ageism represents and what it means, I knew that we were in a very critical time, especially because we're aging so quickly. And ageism has such a great impact, not only on individuals and on society, but also the economy. And we're seeing it, obviously, with COVID. We were alerted to the fact that healthcare and older adults were critically marginalized, and there are all sorts of commentaries about older people not being as relevant. But all of that together combined to make it an urgent story today, in particular because our political systems are not paying attention at all to the reality of this shift in the various countries that we live in.
Thanks, Helen. Deborah, an interesting part of the book for me was the chapter on the myths of ageism, of these common beliefs that people have about older people, younger people, but just the whole concept of age and ageism. Um, Myths of aging do you think are the hardest for individuals to break out of? What beliefs do you think that we're really entrenched in?
Um, I think, I mean, they're all pretty uh, prevalent, but I think the one that sticks for me is the lump of labor fallacy. And some people might be familiar with the lump of labor fallacy from the idea of if you bring, if you can't, you shouldn't bring new people into a country because they're going to take all the jobs away from the other people who live there. And the same kind of thinking applies to older adults. They have to get out of the system so that they can make space for the people for the younger workers so that they can come up into the system and get new jobs. But the lump of labor fallacy, what it does is it assumes that there's a set number of jobs in the economy. So you can't, since there's 10 jobs in the economy, if you're in there and you're old, you better get out so that young people can come in and take those jobs. So it makes no sense in that that's not how economies work. That's never been how economies work. Jobs come into, new jobs are created, old jobs are disappear, different sectors grow and shrink over time. Also, what it doesn't take into consideration is that you actually need to have that memory. You need to have the experience in the workforce. If everybody in the workforce is brand new, how does that work? How would that function effectively? So it has to be a mix of new ideas. It has to be a mix of, and having said that, new ideas are not the exclusive realm of younger people. But in order for organizations to work effectively, they do best when they have a mix of people, whether it's by age or by gender or by race. Diverse perspectives bring more innovation. They bring new ideas. So the challenge with the lump of labor fallacy, the challenge with the mythology that older adults should get going is that it creates a pressure on the individual. So if you're sitting in a job and you're having a great time and you're loving it, and suddenly people are like, "Are you thinking about retiring? So you must be thinking about retiring. Oh, you must be looking forward to your retirement." And as an individual, after a while, you start to go, uh, "Oh, yeah, I guess, maybe I wasn't thinking about that." And it makes an expectation that, oh, I guess I'm holding someone up. Whereas the reality is that if there's a manager who wants to become a director, there's all kinds of director roles out there. It's an assumption. And so it takes away that experience from the organization, and it puts a pressure on the individual to have to retire, assuming that they don't want to retire. Retirement is awesome if you want it, and it's also awesome not to want it. But the idea should be that it should be an individual decision, not structured by the organization or by the people around that individual.
Thanks, Deborah. It's an interesting that thread that you started with, Helen started, and that you added on to, is ageist attitudes hurt the individual affected. It hurts the workplace they work in, but it hurts our economy in a larger way. It's not an individual's problem, and I think that's why it doesn't get the attention that it has, because we think, well, that's about you. In fact, you want to retire, not retire, didn't get this, didn't get that. But it ripples out to really huge implications. And I think that that's why this book is so timely, because we need to totally think about this differently. Um, I want to go back to Helen. Helen, I have a question for you. What differentiates this self-help book? It's more than a self-help book.
Yeah, it is more
Um,
than a self-help book. Yeah. And
from
I think,
from
I think, yeah,
from
from
other
others.
types of books about this subject.
Well, first of all, it deals with aging, which is probably the common denominator in the world. Everybody's aging from the minute they're born till their final breath, although we consider aging usually the purview of older people, unfortunately. Um, so what's different is that it contextualizes what ageism is. We go into great lengths to help our readers understand that ageism is systemic, it's institutionalized, it's structural, it's created, um, and that there are dynamic forces behind it, going back to the mid 20th century, when post World War II we had so many young people, we were an extremely youth-centric society. There were jobs, everybody, fashion was determined by young people, jobs were available. It became unfashionable to grow old. We started discarding the value of wisdom. And so we started shaping everything according to what was constructed, which had to do with capitalism. And therefore, we forgot what it meant to grow older, to what life experience actually offered on every level, personal, um, again, the workplace, societally. And so we started to devalue what it meant to age, and we started to make people feel badly about aging. In fact, what we did is we started shaming people to age, and that became a huge industry, the anti-aging industry. All of this is constructed, but because our whole life we spent inhaling these vibes and these messages, we started to internalize it. And so this book is special because we look at it's a transformational message that internalized ageism is not your fault. It was created and therefore it can be dismantled. But first and foremost, we have to be aware of the effect that it's had, not only on us as individuals, and as you said, Jeannie, societally, economically, it's huge. There have been calculations in the United States, and we do have a lot of statistics in the book too, to how much productivity is missed because we have dismissed a whole generation of people over the age of 60 by, as Deborah indicated, nudging them out. And what's happened now, and this has to do with the reason why we wrote the book also now, is that birth rates are on a decline. Our fertility rates are so low in North America that we're right up there with Japan, South Korea, and a third of the economic leaders in the world. And we can't sustain ourselves if we don't start taking advantage of the strengths, wisdom, intelligence, experience of older people. So there's a really strong transformational message. And the second part of the book is devoted to that. What we can do in order to shape the future of our lives. Once we realize that the thoughts that we have, which we see everywhere, from birthday cards that are funny, and they are funny. They're making fun of old age. But if you go a little bit deeper, you realize that in fact, these are really detrimental messages, especially when you get them every single day. And whether you're in a grocery store and somebody refers to you kindly as dear, or if you go to a medical appointment with an advocate or one of your children, and you're perfectly competent, and the doctor or healthcare worker speaks to your daughter or son as opposed to you, it's dismissive. It makes you lose your confidence. And all of these things happen to us without us even realizing it. And so it limits our potential, it limits our dreams, it robs us of our future, which is rich in potential growth and opportunity. And that's why this book is so different. Because we go
Thank you
into
very
that.
much. Thanks for that, Helen. I just want to remind anyone who came in at the last minute, we're recording this interview and then we're going to stop the recording and then we're going to record Debra and Helen doing a brief reading. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A, which will not be recorded. And the recording of the first two segments will be available. So sometime during this time, make sure you throw your email address into the chat and just say, I'd like the recording and we'll let you know about that. Okay, I have a question now for Debra. What surprised you most when you were doing your research and when you were researching the content and putting the book together? As far as the actual, that you're going, oh, I didn't know that, or how did it affect you personally?
Um, I think it's going to sound like a strange thing to say, but it's the longevity conversation. And it's not that it surprised me that we were living longer. It was actually a comment that Helen made around what an extended lifespan looks like. Because in my mind, it was all happening at the end, right? So everything was normal. And then at the end, you had the extended lifespan. And the reality is that when you do have a longer lifespan, it extends the behavior, the phases that we go through across the lifespan. So you might have noticed that a lot of young adults are still living at home. They're living at home for a number of reasons, but that's part of also what you start to see happening is that you're not racing to get out the door at 18. You might delay it until, you're 24. You might delay it till you're 30 for some. It changes the way that we look at things. And that shift in perspective, that shift in uh, career trajectory for that matter was news to me because suddenly it meant that instead of for me, a career was always you get in, you climb up, and you get out, right? That was what careers looked like. And what we realized as we were looking at this was that when you have a longer lifespan, careers get really weird. You might come in, you might go up, and then you might be like, I'm going to go sideways for a while, or I'm getting out of here altogether and I'm going to start something new. And so we were seeing people having multiple careers. So we have, in fact, I write about it in a book. A friend of mine who had a full-on career for several years as a pharmacist, and then became a realtor and did really well in that, and then decided no, he's going to go back to school and do communications. And then the last time we spoke, he was coaching sorry, can't remember what the name of the sport is now. He was coaching a sport, and I was just like, what? Where did that come from? And it just kind of gets to the opportunities that are created with longevity. And I don't think as culturally we've started to think about what those opportunities represent for us. And I don't think as a structurally we certainly haven't. Our careers, our businesses, our educational systems are still built on the concept of get in, get out, get up. If you try to go back to school as an adult, a university, secondary, post-secondary schools are not quite sure what to do with you. Like they have some ideas, but they just don't know what to do with those adults coming back in. So I think the longevity conversation and what it means over the course of our life to me was just a different way of thinking about what it meant to live longer.
And that ties really well back to what Helen said earlier about that the society is not prepared to have people doing a degree at 61.
Yeah.
They're not prepared for a 65-year-old to come in for a business loan to start a business. So society and the systems have an idea as to what the age group is that you're looking at doing this, doing it that, like you go up and out. Just as from a personal perspective, I had a career for 30 years as a researcher, writer, professional speaker, and then around 60 switched to this whole new career as a book coach and assisting wonderful authors like you two. And I had many people said, well, I thought you were retired. I thought you were retired. And I do think there is a shift that is universal that needs to occur of how we think about this issue. And I personally think that that's why this book is one of the reasons why this book is so fantastic. I want to just switch back to you, Helen, and ask you the same question. What surprised you most when you were researching and writing ReSet?
It had everything to do with branding. Branding. I remember Debra. So first of all, I just want to say to our audience that Debra and I are a multi-generational team. Well, intergenerational. I'm 20 years older than Debra, and so when she talked to me about branding, I thought, You're kidding, aren't you? You're not going to ask me to write something and put it out there." It took me a year and a half before I'd actually put a LinkedIn post in, because I understood nothing about it. And I won't go into detail to what an extent I didn't understand, but all of that about, promotion and your reputation is what branding is. But to me, I had no concept of it whatsoever. So there were a number of things that were very instructional to me, but that's one of the major ones, I would say.
Thanks, Helen. Two totally different answers, which is really interesting. Deborah, what has been the most meaningful response you've received who was exposed to the ReSet program or the ideas that were in the ReSet program that are now in this book?
Uh, it's going to sound like a strange thing to say, but the response to the reset program that it was the posture of people. So it's not to say that, people were the participants were coming in and they were knuckle dragging or anything like that. It was, but they were coming in and they were sort of tentative about stuff. So, oh, I like to make earrings, and it's just this little thing that I like to do, and it was very kind of, you know, um, conservative, quiet, a little bit reticent. And then by the time we got through the program, I remember the same one woman in particular who came into the program and was very, uh, I'm just thinking about doing this, but I'm not sure yet. And at the end of the program, she was like, I've got my business cards. And like she was giving them out like they were candy. Like it was just a posture change that was so just, you could see like it just, all of the hesitation, all of the fear, all of the constraints that she was putting on herself, she got rid of them. It's like watching someone covered in mud get into a fast flowing stream and come out the other side of it, right? Like she just washed it away. And I cannot explain it, but that is, if that doesn't encourage you to want to write a book about what you've done and how and what's created there, I don't know what would.
I have another question on top of that. Deborah, so what does it mean to reset how we think about aging?
Oh, um, I'll go back to the analogy I just used about that stream. I don't think we realize it. If you when we started this conversation and Helen started talking to me, ageism, 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 I remember thinking, okay, right? Like, again, there's a little bit of an age difference between Helen and I, and my attitude was just like, come on, lady. Like I get it. There's ageism, but things change over time. But as I started to dig in and I started to realize about it, I found it was so pervasive. It was everywhere. And I'll be frank with you, it was a little bit enraging for me too, because I've spent my whole life having to deal with people's preconceived notions of what I was bringing to the table. As a woman, as a Black woman, what was I showing up with? And to find out that at the end of, struggling hard, finding my place in my career, finding my status as an individual and having strength in myself, and then being told that, oh, wait a minute, all of that's going to get dismissed because you turned 50 or something. I was just like, hell no. So, so reset is the idea of saying hell no. It's that idea of stepping up and going, I don't have to carry the weight of other people's misconceptions about aging. I don't have to carry the weight of my own misconceptions about aging. I can let it go. I can push it aside, and I can get on with what I'm planning on doing, regardless of what people think. I joke about the fact that when I walk into a room and if people look at me and they think, oh, well, here's a granny and she's at the table and I don't know what she's got to offer. I'm like, let them think it. Good luck to them when I'm done. I just, it's that refreshing, it's resetting, refreshing yourself and starting anew based on who you are, not in your age.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Deborah. I have one last question. I'm going to direct it to Helen before we finish this portion of the book launch. I do want to remind all the people who are on the call that I'm sure that there's questions that are popping up for you. So jot them down, try to remember them, put them in the chat, whatever you want to do. And after the reading segment, we're going to come and have a deep exploration there. So Helen, what would you like readers of the book ReSet to do differently as a result of reading this book?
There's so many things, but first and foremost, I want them to understand that ageism is a construction. It's created, and that means it can be dismantled. That it's not personal, that it's systemic and it's institutional. It's not a personal flaw, and that we need to be aware of it in order to overcome it, essentially. I think we have to start viewing longevity, our longer lives. We need to focus on our mindset. We need to understand that by looking forward to aging, that we'll have a better, fuller life. Then those are choices that we can make. So it's really about seeing the opportunity in front of us as opposed to understanding the old narrative. And that's what ReSet to me is about, resetting all our thinking about what it means to grow old. Growing old is a gift. It's an opportunity that not everybody has. And if we take advantage of our life experience, which we know is really gives us a personal, gives us a performance advantage in every sense, then we can probably live up to our true potential. I mean, stop minimizing what we want to do. Don't look in the mirror and see a wrinkle and think, what a shame. See that wrinkle and rejoice that you're alive and able to continue working, volunteering, creating new opportunities for other people. More than anything, I want people to understand that it requires a collective action. I mean, we're really about a movement, moving forward, reframing what it means to age today. And I believe because we're numerous and we're getting bigger and greater all the time, that in fact, we can make a difference. And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing moving forward, using this book as a basis to get collective action to make changes, not only in our lives personally, because I think that this book has everything to do with a lot of internalized ageism and exposing other ageism, but also the ability that we as a collective can make a difference and dismantle it and enjoy our elderhood.
Thanks, Helen. I just wanted to hold up my copy of the book, which came in the mail this morning. Because I've been so involved with the book, I don't have to read it. I've read it many times, but it's just so lovely the way I really was impressed with the final product. And for those of us who are academically inclined, there is a considerable, more than a couple dozen pages of references that tie to all the research that Helen and Debra did. It's all at the back for those of us who want to read that. For those of us who don't want to read it, don't read it. But it's interesting because, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm curious more about that. Then flip to the back for that chapter and look up some of that research. You might find it really interesting, even though it's not usually something that you do. And that completes our interview segment for the online launch with our authors, Debra Yearwood and Helen Hirsh Spence. So please stay tuned to hear readings from the authors from the book ReSet, Making the Most of the Rest of Your Life.